Memory is not a mysterious gift for the select few, but a skill that can be trained, and anyone can achieve excellence if they know how. This statement opens up a different perspective on memory, a faculty often dismissed as innate, immutable, or even declining with age. In the memory book Asterisk, Harry Lorayne and Jerry Lucas chose a different path. Instead of viewing memory as a random storage locker, they saw it as a system, a structure that can be built, controlled, and expanded. This isn't just a book of mnemonic tricks. It's a map guiding you to use your mind in its most creative form. The work wasn't written to showcase the strange abilities of a few individuals called geniuses, but to prove that anyone can remember a long list, a complex series of numbers, or a deck of 52 cards, provided they agree to play in the language the brain prefers, the language of images, associations, and space. And when an ordinary person can accurately recall dozens of data points in their mind, they not only demonstrate the power of memory, but also reveal the long-forgotten potential of humanity. What's special about this book is how it forces readers to change their perception of remembering. Usually, we think that to remember, we must repeat, cramming information until we're exhausted. But Lorayne and Lucas point out a paradox. The more we try to force memory with monotonous repetition, the easier we forget. Memory thrives on absurdity, on the unexpected, on bizarre imagery more than any seriousness. A dry number easily disappears. But a number embodied as a dramatic character will cling tenaciously to the mind, refusing to leave. The book doesn't just offer techniques, it paints a philosophical framework. Memory is a conscious choice. When we look at an object, hear a story, or read a page, the crucial question isn't whether we can asterisk remember it, but whether we asterisk allow it to leave its mark. This is the core point the authors call original awareness, a primitive state of wakefulness where attention is fully focused and thus memory becomes natural. But ask yourself, in a world where everything is mechanically stored, from phone contacts to birthdays, do humans still need memory? Is memorization becoming an archaic skill, losing its relevance in the age of AI and digital data? Or is it precisely at this moment, when humans are so quick to delegate, that memory becomes more valuable than ever, like a remnant helping us preserve our personal identity in a world that is gradually becoming homogenized? This question has no immediate answer, but this book is written to guide you on a vivid experiment, an experiment to see what your brain can do when given the right tools. Once you start applying them, you might be surprised to find that memory isn't just for retaining numbers, but for enriching experience. Remembering a work of art isn't just knowing its name, it's holding onto a vivid image. Remembering a number isn't just for calculation, it's for turning it into a story. If so, a big question arises. What would life be like if memory were no longer a burden, but a creative joy every day? In ancient times, before notebooks or phones, humans were compelled to rely on memory. From the boisterous dinner parties in Athens to the Roman forums, the art of memory was the key for a person to become a master orator or a respected philosopher. It's said that Simonides, the Greek poet, escaped death at a feast by chance stepping outside, and it was his phenomenal memory that helped him name each body buried beneath the rubble. That story became a legend, initiating a tradition that regarded memory as a serious art, no less profound than philosophy or mathematics. The history of memory art isn't just a fragment of the past, it's a testament to one fundamental truth. When there was no paper, pen, or technology, the brain was the sole storage vault. Cicero once described how he memorized his speeches. He visualized each idea as an object placed within his home. Each time he wanted to recall, he would mentally walk through his house. A door would lead him to the first idea, the staircase would remind him of the next. This is the Method of Loci, one of the oldest methods we still know. Quintilian, the Roman rhetorician, proclaimed that memory has been raised to the highest glory today. These words show that the ancients didn't just see memorization as a tool, but as a divine power. Yet time allowed this art to be forgotten. In the Middle Ages, monks kept it alive by using it to memorize the Bible, virtues, and sins. By the 15th century, Peter of Ravenna wrote the Phoenix Asterisk, a book that spread the art of memory beyond monasteries, leading into the Renaissance. Shakespeare is believed to have used it to write scripts for the Globe Theatre, calling it a theater of memory. But as centuries passed, memory began to be seen as a mere pastime, a stage trick, rather than a serious tool. There was even a period when those who practiced memory techniques were seen as sorcerers. I want you to feel a paradox. Something once considered a gateway to wisdom was forgotten within the very flow of human knowledge. It wasn't until the 19th century that a philosopher named William James wrote, "The world cares nothing for a man's memory, though it needs it as much as it needs breath for the body." Those words were a wake-up call. And now, we are once again reviving this art, not for stage magic, but to apply it to every step of modern life. After understanding this historical journey, we must confront a question. Why do humans remember some things but forget others? The answer lies in a simple yet powerful principle: association. Any memory that endures must be linked to something else already present in the mind. When you remember Italy shaped like a boot, or when you remember the letters EGBDF on a musical staff with the phrase, "Every good boy does fine," you are applying this very principle. Frankly, people don't necessarily forget, they simply never truly remembered in the first place. Someone locks a door, walks away, and then worries whether they actually did it. It's not because memory betrayed them, but because in that moment they weren't truly aware. They didn't link the action with any image or idea. I call this original awareness the primitive recognition. When an event is etched deeply by attention and association, it becomes unforgettable. You can try it right now. Imagine a foreign country, difficult to visualize on a map like Greece. For most, it will quickly slip from your mind. But Italy, everyone remembers because it resembles a boot. When the invisible is made visible, the brain immediately latches on. Or when you learn to spell PS by thinking of a piece of pie, you are attaching the new to the old. That is the fundamental mechanism of all memory techniques. From here, I lead you to another secret: all thoughts are images. Aristotle believed that humans cannot think without an image in their mind. When I say the word elephant, you are compelled to see an elephant, even if only for a fleeting moment. And that proves that to remember, we don't need supernatural memory. We just need to learn how to create the right images and link them together. Without association, memories will slip through your fingers like sand. But with the right technique, sand can coalesce into stone, enduring through the years. Memory is not a divine gift, but a skill that can be trained. The only thing you have to do is force yourself to observe, create initial awareness, and then link the new with the old. The more absurd, the more bizarre, the harder it is to forget. Once you grasp this principle, what we are about to delve into will no longer be magic tricks, but a journey of intellectual expansion. As we begin to practice, the principle of association will reveal its true power. The linking system is not just an abstract idea but a concrete tool, where each image becomes a link connecting to the next, forming an unbreakable chain. The mechanism is simple. Each item reminds you of the next, like stepping stones on a path. But the secret lies in this. The more paradoxical, irrational, and contrary to common sense these associations are, the more firmly the brain holds onto them. Try to imagine a giant airplane not flying in the sky but rooting itself like a colossal tree. This tree is heavy with envelopes, as if its fruits are envelopes. You open an envelope, and instead of letters, thousands of earrings fall out. Then suddenly, these very earrings transform into water buckets, and these buckets sing aloud. Buckets are singing? This sound causes numerous basketballs to bounce into the air, but they are replaced by round, red salamis. A moment later, the salami shines brightly, becoming a star, and finally the star sprouts a human nose. All these absurd connections create a coherent sequence. Just by remembering the airplane, the entire chain automatically follows. This is the mechanism of the linking system. Once we've linked 10 images, remembering 20 or 30 is merely a matter of repetition. The power lies not in innate memory, but in our daring to create such wildly imaginative pictures. However, to practice quickly and accurately, there are 4 rules to follow. 1. Substitution. See one object as another, like imagining a flying tree instead of an airplane. 2. Exaggeration. Magnify the size, making objects gigantic or tiny bizarre. 3. Hyperbole. Don't hesitate to imagine millions or billions of objects flooding the scene. 4. Action. Put them into powerful motion, creating an unforgettable impression. Just a few seconds of imagination can create a strong, durable chain in your brain. It is precisely the absurdity that acts as a firm hook for memory. The ancients once wrote in the asterisk rhetorica ad hirnium that people easily forget ordinary things, but cannot forget the unusual, the strange, or even the ridiculously trivial. The art of memory is based on this truth and art that complements nature. Having mastered tangible objects, the question arises, what about abstract concepts? How can one remember a name, a concept, a foreign word that has no concrete form? The answer is substitute words. This principle is just as simple. When you encounter a word you can't visualize, find another word or phrase that sounds similar or evokes an association, as long as it can be transformed into an image. From there, you link this image with what you need to remember. For example, Minnesota sounds unfamiliar, hard to engrave in your mind, but if you turn it into mini-soda, a tiny soft drink bottle, the picture immediately comes alive. Or Massachusetts can become Massachusetts, a crowd chewing and sitting down. Maryland could be Maryland, a bride landing on the ground. All these bizarre phrases immediately create memories. I once trained myself to remember the list of 50 US states this way. Each difficult name suddenly became full of imagery. Alabama became Alabama, a llama in an alley. Alaska brought to mind Alaska, a lass girl. Arizona became Arizona, a woman named Riza. And when I linked them using the linking system, the long string of states became an absurd yet fascinating visual journey. The strange thing is that the human brain delights in logical nonsense. It latches on and doesn't let go. Rationality, however, slips from memory quickly. This leads us to a profound truth. Imagination, often deemed useless, is the ultimate weapon of memory. Children remember easily because they live in a world of imagination. Adults gradually lose this ability because society forces them into rigid rationality. But when retrained, the mind will reawaken, like a rusty wheel beginning to turn again. You can try it with your own name. If your name is Anne, think of Anne, peace safety, and imagine a seatbelt wrapped around you. If your name is Leo, think of lion and imagine a lion following you everywhere. The name, originally invisible, is now cloaked in an image and will never be forgot. The linking system and substitute words, one for the tangible, one for the intangible. When combined, they form a powerful duo, transforming all information, from a table in your house to abstract philosophical concepts, into vivid images in your mind. And once it becomes an image, even if you want to forget it, it will keep coming back, like your own shadow in the light. Once you're accustomed to linking images and creating substitute words, memory begins to reveal its power in daily life. What was once considered magic now becomes the most useful tool. I recall a story often told about Harry Pillsbury, a chess grandmaster. He was once challenged to listen to a long list of 30 strange words, many from medicine and philosophy, with no common theme. After hearing them only once, Pillsbury repeated them fluently from beginning to end, then backward. He even remembered them perfectly the next day. What amazed the audience became easily understandable to me. Pillsbury used association and substitute words to force his memory. A complex medical term could be transformed into a ridiculous image. An abstract philosophical phrase could become a vivid scene. You see, we can do the same with the small things in life. A shopping list is no longer a nuisance. Imagine you need to buy oranges, milk, and bread. Instead of writing them down and forgetting the paper at home, you link them. You peel an orange and milk flows out. But it's not white milk, it's soft, warm slices of bread. That image will stay with you at the supermarket. No paper or pen needed. Daily chores are similar. You need to pick up clothes from the dry cleaner, buy light bulbs, and call to register your child for swimming lessons. Just create links. The shirt transforms into a glowing light bulb. Then that light bulb jumps into a swimming pool, splashing water everywhere. This illogical image makes the tasks a coherent sequence. The next morning, when you think about it, you won't forget anything. But the application doesn't stop at small matters. Think of a speech. Most people's mistake is trying to memorize every word, resulting in a stiff, unnatural delivery. And if they forget one word, the whole speech collapses. The right approach is to remember the main idea chain, because a speech is essentially a flow of ideas, not words. The method is clear. You write the entire speech, then select keywords for each idea. These words are your pillars. For example, if you want to talk about declining profits, you choose profits. The next idea, need more customers, keyword, customers. Then building a brand, keyword, Brand. You link them with bizarre images. An old woman drunkenly drinking gin walks into a store where she encounters a giant floating brand name. This absurd image will help you remember the entire sequence of ideas. When you stand before the audience, you just need to remember the old woman drinking gin, and you'll fluently speak about profits. Then that image leads you to customers, and you remember the next part. The flow never breaks. You're not speaking from rote memory, but from the vividness of ideas. Sometimes within each idea, there are specific details to remember, like product names or numbers. That's when you use a branching technique, which I call branching links. After linking the main idea, you connect each detail like a branch growing from the trunk. This way, you maintain the main flow without missing small details. All of this leads to another incredibly useful application: learning foreign languages. New words are often a nightmare for anyone. They are foreign, meaningless, and evoke nothing in the mind. But with substitute words, they immediately find their place. For example, to remember the English word carpet, you might think of car and pet, a cat pet sitting on a car, or imagine carpet as a cat cat on a mat. When carpet is no longer strange, the important thing here is to turn the invisible into the visible. A concept, a strange sound, a difficult-to-read sequence of characters, all must be transformed into a scene, a joke, an action. This very transformation creates lasting memories. Without a scene, words merely float past like the wind. But once they become images, they will remain, sometimes despite your very wish to forget them. And one thing you will gradually realize: memory, once trained, doesn't just serve to remember more, it creates a different feeling: freedom. You are no longer dependent on papers, devices, or sticky notes on your desk. Instead, you carry a mobile archive within your own head, ready to use at any time. Applications that seem small, like a grocery list or a conference speech, actually open up a vast door. They prove that any information can be captured if you know how to turn it into an image and connect it. And once you start, you'll find it hard to stop, because your brain itself will crave this the game of imagination and recall. Among all forms of memorization, perhaps the most challenging is linking names to faces. A list of objects or long numbers can be tackled with associations and substitute words. But when faced with a stranger, hearing their name for a fleeting moment, only to forget it a few minutes later, we realize how easily memory can betray us. In reality, it's not that memory fails, but that we never truly imprinted it in the first place. The familiar principle still holds true: transform the invisible into the visible. A name, by itself, has no shape. Therefore, the only way is to find a suggestive word, a substitute image, and then directly attach it to a prominent feature on the person's face. If their name is Charles, you might imagine a school building, Truong, in Vietnamese means school, resembling Charles, placed right on their broad forehead. If someone's name is Lily, imagine a vibrant flower blooming in their hair. Once the image is attached, the name is unlikely to disappear throughout your career. I have met thousands, even millions of faces. Each handshake, I forced myself to find a distinctive feature to create an association. Some people have large ears. I immediately hung a bell there to suggest a name like Bell. Some have pointed noses. I imagined that nose transforming into a needle to remember a name like Needle. All of this happens in a fleeting moment. But it is this bizarre imagination that keeps memories firm. The crucial element is original awareness when being introduced. Most of us hear a name merely as a fleeting sound. Our ears hear, but our brains don't engage. The consequence is that a few minutes later, when we want to recall it, there's nothing to cling to. But when we force ourselves to look closely at the face, find a unique feature, and then connect it with an image symbolizing the name, memory is firmly anchored. This method might sound laborious, but it actually only requires a few seconds of attention. Try it at a crowded party. You meet someone named Bin, who has a large, steady build. You imagine him standing like a giant ceramic vase. Bin, in Vietnamese means vase, right in the middle of the room. Afterward, every time you see his physique, the image of the vase reappears and the name Bin automatically returns. But memory doesn't just fail with names. It also deceives us in many more familiar situations. Forgetting objects, forgetting to lock the door, forgetting whether we've done something or not. This is the age-old malady of absent-mindedness. Many mistakenly believe it's a sign of weakening memory, but in truth, the fact is that the action was never truly imprinted in the first place. When you lock the door in a hurry, your mind preoccupied with today's work, the act of locking is not truly registered. Walking away and then asking yourself, "Did I lock it?" is inevitable because you never truly remembered it. You weren't there when the action happened. The solution isn't to try to remember it later, but to force your mind to focus on the initial moment. Turn the action into a scene, even a bizarre one. When turning the key, imagine the entire door swallowing the key like food. When placing the keys on the table, visualize the table transforming into a beast guarding the keys. At that moment, memory firmly latches on. This habit can be applied to any small task. Setting down your glasses, glance at them and imagine the glasses growing roots, sticking firmly to the surface. Turning off the stove, visualize the tiny flame transforming into a flower that folds up and goes to sleep. Just a few seconds of imagination, and your brain will no longer overlook these details. You see, the problem isn't weak memory, it's empty initial awareness. When we learn to bring awareness into each moment, absent-mindedness gradually disappears. The brain doesn't need to do more, we just need to force it to truly be present. Thus, remembering names and faces, as well as overcoming forgetfulness, all return to the core principle proven from the start: association and imagery. A name is no longer just a sound, but becomes a scene attached to a face. A small action no longer passes unconsciously, but is fixed by a bizarre image right in the moment it occurs. When you practice long enough, the difference will be clear. You will start remembering the names of people you've just met without writing them down. You will forget fewer objects because the image of where you place them will remain in your mind. And strangely, this change not only improves your memory, but also makes you live more consciously, less unconsciously. Memory, after all, is the art of forcing oneself to see the world with fresh eyes. When we see, we remember. When we remember, we gain control. And when we control our memory, we also begin to control more of our own lives. In modern life, nothing seems as meaningless and dry as sequences of numbers. Bank account numbers, product codes, social security numbers, phone numbers, or endless statistics. Many tremble before them, feeling their brain is an empty box when faced with so many cold characters. But the truth is, numbers are merely raw material, and the brain can absolutely mold them into rich, colorful pictures. Memorizing long numbers seems impossible, but when you transform them into images, you'll find it as easy as remembering a bizarre story. The secret lies in a simple principle. Each number must become an image, a concrete object. When a sequence of numbers is no longer soulless characters, but a vivid chain of images, the brain naturally latches onto them. Imagine the number sequence 347. If you see it as three numbers, you'll forget it after a moment. But if 3 is a tree, 4 is a cat, and 7 is a hammer, a picture emerges, a giant tree growing a cat. That cat is hit by a hammer, shattering into light. The sequence 347 is then imprinted, impossible to erase. Meaningless has become meaningful. To make this process more consistent, I introduce a foundational system, the PEG system. This method assigns each number from 0 to 9 a familiar keyword, creating memory hooks. You can choose any word as long as it evokes a strong image. For example, 0 is an egg, 1 is a candle, 2 is a swan, 3 is lips, 4 is a sailboat, 5 is a starfish, 6 is a cherry, 7 is a scythe, 8 is glasses, and 9 is a balloon. Once each number has a symbol, remembering long sequences is no longer difficult. Take the sequence 1609. You imagine a candle stuck into an egg, then that egg cracks open into a cherry, and finally, a balloon carries everything into the sky. This strange scene will anchor the number sequence in your memory like a vivid painting. What's remarkable is that once you have the PEG numbers, you can not only remember forwards but also backward. Challenge yourself. Listen to a 10-digit number, turn it into a chain of images, then recite it from beginning to end, and then from end to beginning. Your brain will succeed because the images are linked like chain links. And the interesting thing is, the more links, the stronger the chain. When you apply this technique, you'll see a clear difference. A 12-digit bank account number that once confused you is now just a silly but easy-to-remember story. A simple example, the sequence 278451. You visualize a giant swan swallowing a pair of glasses, then the glasses fall onto a boat. On the boat, a star clings to a candle. This bizarre image automatically anchors the number sequence in your memory. Someone once asked me, why go through the trouble of imagining? Isn't writing it down faster? I replied. Writing it down is only a temporary solution. Paper can be lost, phones can break, but the images created by the brain cling much more deeply. Memory becomes a mobile storage unit that you carry everywhere. The important thing is not that you remember every detail, but that you dare to let your imagination go beyond the conventional. The more absurd, the more contrary, the easier it is to remember. If you need to remember 911, imagine a giant balloon exploding, and from it emerge two burning candles. You will never forget, even if you want to. Once you're familiar with the peg system, you can expand it to hundreds, even thousands of numbers. What seems daunting, a long sequence of 10, 20, or even 50 numbers, is actually just an extended story, where each number is a peculiar character stepping onto the stage. And above all, you'll feel a special excitement. The dryness of mathematics, the soullessness of data, suddenly become a creative game. Numbers are no longer just numbers, they are scenes you construct. From then on, memory is no longer passive, but becomes an art form where you are the creator of an entire world in your head. With the peg system in hand, we begin to see how every number sequence in daily life suddenly becomes pliable. Phone numbers, prices, product codes, things that easily slip from memory are now just small stories that can be staged right in your mind. The clearest example is phone numbers. An ordinary person might remember their own number, but when they need to call someone they rarely contact, they immediately reach for a notebook or phone directory. But with the peg system, you can remember dozens of different numbers. Try it with the sequence 32587071. You just need to imagine lips kissing a swan. The swan jumps onto a starfish, then puts on giant glasses. The glasses fall onto an egg. The egg cracks open to reveal a candle. The candle is cut in half by a scythe. This 6-digit sequence, which seemed dry, is now a colorful play in your mind. This applies to any sequence: prices, item codes, numbers on a bill. All can become images. Instead of remembering that a watch has code C915, you imagine a C riding a balloon, then it crashes into a starfish before exploding into a candle. Thus, the dry symbol is transformed into an easily imprinted scene. Especially when you combine the peg system with the linking principle you learned earlier, you'll find that memory is not only accurate but also flexible. You can combine multiple number sequences, even remember an entire product catalog. Instead of feeling stressed, you'll find it fascinating, like playing a bizarre jigsaw puzzle that only you understand. From practical applications, let's move to another legendary feat: memorizing an entire deck of cards. This was once a magician's trick that stunned audiences. But in reality, the secret is just a combination of the peg system and imagination. Each card can be linked to a specific word or image. Spades can become a shovel, hearts a heart, diamonds a diamond, clubs a club. Then, each number from ace to king will have its own image. For example, the 4 of hearts would be 4 hearts linked together. The king of diamonds would be a king wearing a diamond crown. Once you've established this list of images, remembering the order of an entire deck is just a matter of chaining them together. Suppose someone shuffles and draws 10 random cards. You can turn each card into a scene and then connect them with absurd associations. The ace of spades could become a giant shovel digging into the ground, where a cat is sitting and eating a heart. That scene is then disrupted by a king wearing a diamond crown who charges in and knocks everything over. And so, the entire sequence of cards becomes a surreal movie in your head. Not only that, you can also remember the position of each card. When asked where the 7 of hearts is, you can immediately retrieve it because it's a link in the story you constructed. And if asked in reverse, what card is in the 15th position? You can also answer because each position has been linked to a specific scene. As you practice, you'll gradually realize that the human brain is not as weak as we once thought. It can hold all 52 cards in their exact order as long as there are enough images and associations. The interesting thing is that this makes you feel like you're hacking your own brain. But the truth is simpler. You are just giving memory the language it prefers, the language of images and absurdity. It's worth noting that you don't need to be a stage performer to find this method useful. Remembering relatives' phone numbers, product prices, or the order of tasks on a to-do list all rely on the same principles. Numbers and symbols are inherently cold, but when transformed into characters and stories, they become familiar and unforgettable. Once you're proficient enough to remember a deck of cards, remembering a few disconnected numbers or a phone sequence will be as easy as breathing. And at that moment, you'll see that memory is not just a tool, but a creative game that turns everyday life into a stage full of surprises. In the hurried pace of life, what confuses many people is not long numbers or complex product codes, but rather appointments and important dates. Who hasn't forgotten a meeting, missed a schedule, or felt flustered not remembering a loved one's birthday? These seemingly small mistakes can sometimes leave a bad impression or cause hard-to-fix consequences. Yet, all of them can be handled using the same familiar principle: image association. Remembering appointments and days of the week doesn't require a thick notebook or reminder apps. When someone says, Wednesday, 3 p.m., you can immediately create a scene. Imagine the number 3 as 3 burning candles. They are placed on the back of a camel carrying a large sign that says, Wednesday. In your mind, you see that scene clearly, and it will stay with you until the event occurs. You not only remember the time and day, but with near absolute certainty, because the image is too vivid to be forgotten. The same applies to the weekly schedule. Think of each day as a separate character or object. Monday could be a door opening to a new week. Tuesday is a swan wearing the number 2. Wednesday is 3 candles. Thursday is a raised hand. Friday is a giant fish. Saturday is a scythe, and Sunday is a blazing sun. When every day has its own form, they no longer pass anonymously, but become a troupe of characters you can call upon at any time. From days of the week, we move to personal dates. Birthdays, anniversaries, holidays. We usually remember these dates because they repeat every year. But if the list of anniversaries grows long, the brain begins to betray us. The solution is to bring each day into imagination. If February 14th is Valentine's Day, you can imagine the number 14 transforming into a giant heart that cracks open, revealing 2 candles embracing inside. If July 2nd is Independence Day, visualize a swan flapping its wings in the sky, dropping a brightly colored balloon that explodes into fireworks. These images not only help you remember, but also evoke the emotions associated with them. Zodiac signs are also an interesting challenge. 12 symbols, sometimes with unfamiliar names, hard to retain in memory. But when we transform each sign into a concrete scene, they suddenly become strange friends living in our heads. Aries is a ram butting a wall. Taurus is a giant bull standing in the middle of a field. Gemini are 2 children laughing, and so on to Pisces with 2 fish intertwining. When you need to remember someone's sign, you simply link their birthday to the symbol. A friend born on June 21st. You imagine a swan looking at the summer solstice sun, and beside it is the image of Gemini splitting in 2. The scene immediately fixes both the date and the zodiac sign. Not only personal anniversaries or astrological symbols, but memory also helps us grasp historical milestones. This is often a nightmare for students, a barrage of dry dates, wars, treaties, and figures in succession. But when you apply the same principle, they become as easy to remember as any story. Take, for example, July 4, 1776, U.S. Independence Day. You just need to imagine 4 fireworks exploding in the sky, from which a scythe flies down to the ground. A row of 7 burning candles forms a fence. All appear as a vivid, noisy picture. No one can forget that image, and the date will automatically follow. Or, if you want to remember 1492, the year Columbus discovered America, imagine a candle stuck into an egg. The egg cracks open to reveal 4 swans swimming on the ocean, and finally, a pair of glasses flying up like sails. Each detail is a number combining into a historical year. This approach has 2 benefits. You not only remember the exact date, but also experience it as a vivid scene. History is no longer a lifeless list, but becomes a series of films in your imagination. And when students or anyone practices this way, they no longer fear data, because it has transformed into an intellectual game. When we think deeply, we realize that all forms of time-based data, from a small appointment to a birthday, from a zodiac sign to a historical milestone, differ only in scale. The principle remains the same. Transform numbers into images, then connect the images with absurd associations. And the more you practice, the more capable you become of managing time, anniversaries, and history like a treasure always ready in your mind, independent of notebooks or devices. If numbers can be transformed into images, so can letters. And once we grasp that principle, the entire alphabet, once dry, becomes a vibrant stage. Visualizing letters helps us remember spelling, symbols, formulas, or any sequence of characters that seemed hard to grasp. For example, the letter A can become an image of a standing ladder, B a rocking drum with two round faces, C a crescent moon, D a door, and E a three-pronged comb. When you need to remember a word, instead of struggling with meaningless characters, you simply read a sequence of images. A simple example to remember the word, cab. You can imagine a taxi carrying a crescent moon, a ladder, and a rocking drum. In this way, characters are no longer a jumble, but become an easily memorable scene. This technique is especially useful for learning the spelling of complex words or remembering formulas containing intricate characters. But the true power of this method reveals itself most clearly when applied to children. Children naturally live in a world of imagination where everything can talk and move. Therefore, visual memory is their natural language. A child is not very interested in reading a dry list, but is ready to remember an entire colorful story. I have witnessed this many times in teaching. When a child is asked to remember 10 objects, initially they are worried. But with just a few minutes of instruction, they can repeat them fluently, even backward. They imagine an apple turning into a balloon flying into the sky. Then the balloon falls, landing on a shoe. The shoe then sings like a singer. The entire sequence is imprinted in their mind, and the child is excited as if they just played a game. Training memory for young children not only helps them learn faster, but also instills in them a belief that their brain can do more than they thought. That belief is a precious asset because most adults lose confidence in their memory simply because they were taught the wrong way from childhood. If children understand from the beginning that memory is a skill, not innate, they will carry that advantage throughout their lives. From learning letters and numbers, let's try to expand into a seemingly unfamiliar field: sports. Here, memory is not just a tool for the learner, but also a weapon for the athlete. A basketball player must remember countless movements, strategies, and statistics. A tennis player needs to recall how an opponent reacts in every situation. A track and field athlete must know sequences of exercises and breathing rhythms. This data is often dry, but when transformed into images, it immediately becomes easy to remember. A player can remember a series of moves by visualizing each step as a scene. A three-point shot becomes an image of a ball burning with fire. A cross-court pass becomes a bridge spanning a river. A block is an iron gate slamming shut. When on the court, he simply plays that movie in his head. Fans can also use this method to remember statistics and rules of the game. Instead of memorizing dry lists, they link each number to an image. The score 118-100 is no longer a sequence of numbers but becomes a story. A candle next to a pair of glasses. At the same time, another candle emerges from a balloon, and a hand slaps down. Once the story is constructed, the score stays in memory much more easily than with conventional learning methods. Sports is often considered a field of muscle, but in reality, it's a subtle combination of memory and reflexes. Those who master the art of memory will have a distinct advantage because they not only focus on physical strength, but also control a stored archive of tactics in their mind. And thus, we see a complete journey from endless numbers to character sequences, from calendar dates to personal anniversaries, from adult memory to child memory, and even athletes. Memory is no longer limited to a narrow corner, but encompasses all areas of life. It becomes the key to unlocking hidden potential, a source of power that is both practical, creative, and liberating. The stock market is a labyrinth of symbols, numbers, and endless fluctuations. Hundreds of stock codes, each a combination of seemingly meaningless letters, along with numerous numbers representing prices, volatility indices, and percentage changes. People usually rely on computers, reports, and apps to track them. But I want to point out that your brain can become a living electronic board if you know how to convert those cold symbols into images. Turning stock codes into image sequences is the first step. Take a familiar example, IBM. Most people only see 3 soulless letters, but if you visualize I as a candle, B as a rocking drum, and M as a mountain, IBM immediately appears in your memory as a scene. A bright burning candle placed on a drum, the drum rolling down the foot of a mountain. And if the current stock price is 143, you just need to transform it into images of a candle, a crescent moon, and lips kissing each other. Both the stock code and the price are linked to a story hard to forget. With practice, you can manage multiple stock codes in your head simultaneously, each code becoming a distinct character. Ford is a car speeding down the road. Apple is a giant glowing apple. Google is overlapping magnifying glasses. Each symbol is a role, and the accompanying numerical values are their bizarre actions. This way, you can remember not only the code, but also the price, the increase-decrease index, and even the daily fluctuations. Here, we clearly see that financial data does not necessarily have to be beyond human memory. It can become a visual story, where each symbol suddenly takes on a form. And when the brain treats data as a story, it retains it more powerfully than any electronic chart. After the financial market, I want to lead you to another world also full of numbers and names: politics. There, memory plays an equally important role. Someone working in this environment must remember countless names, titles, constituencies, and sequences of events. For most, it's a memory burden. But with the linking system, every character and event can become an unforgettable scene. Imagine you need to remember a congressman named Green from the state of Ohio. Green immediately transforms into the color green, and you link it to an image of a grassy field. Ohio has a heart shape on the map. You imagine a lush green field inside a red heart. Thus, the name and location are firmly linked, inseparable. Or you need to remember a politician named Baker, who serves on the finance committee. Baker becomes a baker, and you imagine him standing before a giant oven. Inside, instead of bread, there are stacks of money burning brightly. At that moment, his financial function becomes a vivid, unforgettable image. Political events, often dry with dates and sequences, can also be turned into story chains. If you want to remember an election that took place on November 6th, imagine a cherry falling onto a candle and then exploding into a door opening to a polling station. This image will help you not only remember the date, but also link it to its meaning. This method can be extended to an entire schedule. An election campaign can become a visual journey. A speech in New York is symbolized by the Statue of Liberty holding a microphone. A trip to California appears as an image of a bear wearing a red coat, and an event in Texas is a giant bull ramming a billboard. Each political location is an iconic image, and the entire schedule becomes a touring movie in your mind. You can see that from fluctuating stock codes to political figures, everything is put into the same mechanism, transforming the invisible into the visible, data into scenes, and connecting them with absurd associations. And when this happens, memory is no longer intimidated by data or events, but becomes a precise recording machine. The brain doesn't distinguish between economic data or social events. It just needs a familiar language, the language of images and associations. When you speak to it in that language, you will find its ability to remember surpasses all limits. The world of art seems to belong to inspiration and intuition, but in reality, it's also filled with data. Titles of works, artists' names, schools, periods, styles. People often say that art doesn't need to be memorized, only appreciated. But for me, memorization is a way of deeper appreciation. Because when you grasp the entire context, each detail becomes part of a living memory. Memorizing art doesn't mean knowing it by heart like an encyclopedia. It's the process of transforming lists of artists, sculptors, and playwrights into a visual map. For example, you need to remember Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, and Michelangelo, the three Renaissance masters. Leonardo can become a lion sitting and drawing on a giant canvas. Raphael transforms into a small angel blowing a trumpet, and Michelangelo can become a tall, mighty angel carving a stone statue. When these three characters enter the same scene in your mind, you've imprinted them as an inseparable group. A specific painting can also be remembered with symbolic images. For instance, the Mona Lisa can be linked to her enigmatic smile. You imagine a face hidden behind a mask, with only half a mouth slightly upturned. Raphael's School of Athens can become an image of an ancient classroom with Socrates standing on a podium, holding a glowing book. And Michelangelo's David appears as a giant stone man holding a slingshot, ready to fire. This way of remembering helps you recall not only the work's name, but also the artist associated with it. Eras and artistic movements can also be turned into stories. If you need to remember that Impressionism began in the late 19th century, imagine a hazy painting of a sunrise hanging on a giant clock stopped at 19. And Cubism, linked with Picasso, you can visualize cubes floating around the artist painting with 4 hands. Each movement is transformed into a strange scene, and when pieced together, you have an entire flow of art in your memory. From visual art, we move into a field equally rich in data: music. For beginners, learning music often seems like a difficult journey because symbols, scales, and rhythms are all unfamiliar. But when applying the principle of association, music is no longer lifeless characters on paper, but becomes a sequence of images and evocative sounds. Using substitute words to remember scales is an effective method. For example, the note do can become dollar. You imagine a dollar bill flying off the staff. Ray becomes red. A curtain, you see a curtain falling. Me transforms into noodles. A whole bowl of noodles spills onto a piano. Fa becomes vase, crystal. A glass breaks into pieces. Sol is the sun. Dazzling light fills the room. La becomes leaf. A rain of leaves falls. C is cement. The entire piano is covered in cement. When you need to remember the order, just visualize the entire scene: dollar flying, curtain falling, noodles splashing, crystal breaking, sun shining, leaves falling, cement flooding. The scale is no longer just sound, but a colorful story. Musical notation can also be remembered this way. A sharp sign transforms into a 3-pronged rake, a flat sign becomes a falling leaf, a treble clef becomes a winding snake. When you learn music theory, each symbol has its own image, and remembering them becomes easy. Music is not just theory, but also a sense of rhythm. A 3/4 time signature can become an image of 3 burning candles on a dining table. A 4/4 time signature becomes 4 doors opening and closing simultaneously. When you tap the rhythm, this image reappears, helping your body automatically follow the music. The important point here is that art and music, often considered realms of inspiration, can absolutely become objects of memory. By transforming them into images, you retain the data while adding depth to the experience. A painting or a piece of music is not just something to see and hear, but to live with it in your imagination. When you remember movements, works, scales, and symbols, you are no longer an outsider gazing in but a participant. And memory, in this case, is not just a useful tool, but a bridge that allows you to delve deeper into the world of art. In modern life, reading is a continuous activity: books, newspapers, reports, emails, contracts. Every day, thousands of words flood our eyes, but most fall away before they can anchor in memory. People often complain, "After reading a chapter, I forget the main points just a few minutes later." But the truth is, reading isn't the problem. How you *retain is the key. When approaching a passage, the secret is to extract keywords. Each paragraph always has one or more living word seeds that carry the entire meaning. If you just skim without recognizing them, the passage will disappear. But if you pause, find the keyword, and transform it into an image, you've planted a seedling in your memory. For example, you read the sentence, "Ancient Greek civilization laid the foundation for Western philosophy." The keywords here are Greece and philosophy. Instead of just skimming, imagine a long-bearded philosopher sitting on the Parthenon temple, holding a glowing book. That scene is your vivid keyword. When you connect many passages, you have an entire chain of guiding images, and by just looking back at one piece, the entire meaning comes flooding back. This is the art of active reading, not letting words lie still, but forcing them to embody images. When you do this, memory is no longer passive, but becomes a sculptor, carving each detail into your brain. Reading is no longer an invisible flow, but a series of pictures. But sometimes we need more than remembering a few main points. Imagine you have to memorize an entire data table, a complex diagram, or even a complete list of locations. Here, individual images are not enough. You need a structure, an internal map, and that's when the memory graph comes in. A memory graph is an invisible grid you build in your mind. Imagine a board divided into dozens of small squares. Each square holds a specific position. When you need to memorize data, you place it into each square, accompanied by a symbolic image like hanging items on hooks. But instead of hanging strings, you have a memory grid. For example, if you want to remember 10 tourist attractions on a journey, instead of letting them float, you attach each place to a square. The first square might be the Eiffel Tower. You imagine it in the top left corner. The second square contains the Egyptian pyramids. The third is the Great Wall of China. When you need to recall, you simply look back at your grid. Each position will remind you of the correct order. The strength of the memory graph is its ability to locate. The human brain is inherently sensitive to space, where we put things, city routes, room shapes. The memory graph simply exploits this instinct and then expands it to all types of data. This system isn't just for locations, but also for data tables or numbers. You can imagine a 10x10 grid. Each square is a position containing 4 digits. When someone points to square 37, you immediately recite the 4 numbers located there, because you had placed them with images beforehand. It sounds like magic, but it's really just using space as a framework for memory. Another example, you need to remember the content of a thick book chapter. You can create a memory graph with 9 squares. Each square contains a main idea. In each square, you embed an image keyword. When recalling, you simply move through each square in order. You not only remember the entire structure, but can also recount it coherently because the framework is firmly held. The strange thing is that when we place data into space, memory becomes more precise. The brain seems designed to remember locations. The memory graph simply exploits that instinct and expands it to all types of data. When reading is combined with a memory graph, the power doubles. You not only remember the main points of each paragraph, but also know where it fits into the overall picture. Reading a book is like entering a house. Keywords are furniture, and the memory graph is the rooms. When you want to find something again, you don't rummage through memories. You just go into the right room and retrieve the right item. Reading and memorizing, which were once considered 2 separate activities, now merge into a single process. Each time you build a frame and embed images into it, no longer suffering from reading and then forgetting, because memory has a place to put things, and that place is never confused. As this journey nears its end, I want to offer you some smaller branches, seemingly disparate pieces that actually open wider doors to memory. We call it potpourri, a basket holding all sorts of flavors. Not every technique requires a massive system. Sometimes just a small trick makes a difference. For example, when you need to remember the name of a new acquaintance, don't let it just glide past your ear. Immediately turn the name into an image. Someone named Rose can transform into a rose pinned to their shirt. Someone named Carter can become an image of a carpenter's hammer tapping on their shoulder. Just a few seconds, and you've linked that name to an unforgettable detail. Or when learning a foreign language, you can pair new words with words in your native tongue using a bizarre associative image. Suddenly, your vocabulary blossoms like a new garden. Another tip is to emphasize with extreme action. If an important idea needs to be retained, don't imagine it lying still. Make it explode, burn brightly, be cut in half, or transform into a giant animal. The brain is drawn to drama, and it won't overlook a scene that you've exaggerated. There are times when you need to remember a short list, like 3 tasks for the day. You can build a mini chain: buy milk, make a call, send a letter. In your mind, you see yourself riding on a dairy cow. It moos, transforming into a giant telephone. Then the telephone explodes into flying envelopes. These 3 tasks, after that bizarre chain of images, become hard to forget. All these small tips have one thing in common. They remind you that memory doesn't demand hardship but creativity. And when you cultivate this habit, even the most trivial tasks become a game in your mind. From potpourri, we move to another scene: locus emis. This isn't just a slogan but an invitation to challenge yourself. All the techniques you've learned: association, memory palace, visualizing letters and numbers can be integrated to create memory feats. Imagine you're standing before an audience. Someone reads 50 random numbers. You immediately repeat them, even backward. Another person shuffles a deck of cards. You glance at it and then recite the order correctly. A group of audience members gives you a list of 30 items. You recite them fluently. They'll think you were born with a genius mind. But the truth is different. You're simply operating a system that anyone can learn. These demonstrations aren't for showing off, but to prove one thing: human memory can surpass preconceived notions. They shatter the illusion that only a few are blessed with special abilities. In reality, anyone can do it if they commit to practicing and applying the language the brain prefers. And then, as we conclude, I want to emphasize a concept I call original awareness, that primitive state of wakefulness when you look at things. Often, we forget not because our memory is weak, but because we never truly saw asterisk in the first place. When you're indifferent, data doesn't even reach your brain. But when you pay attention with all your senses, the image is immediately imprinted. Original awareness is the habit of active observation. Not just reading but visualizing, not just hearing but attaching images, not just looking but paying attention. When you possess this awareness, all the previous techniques become easier because they are built on solid ground. Without that foundation, all memory tricks are just castles of sand. I have led you from dry numbers to vivid pictures, from the stock market to zodiac signs, from initial musical notes to memory feats. But everything returns to the same point. The brain needs images, associations, space, and complete attention. When you give it these four elements, memory suddenly explodes, becoming a loyal and powerful machine, the beginning of a journey you will undertake yourself. Memory is not a fixed gift, it is a capacity that can be trained. And the more you train, the more you will find yourself not just remembering, but living more deeply, more fully. Everything discussed in this book leads us to a simple truth, yet few are willing to believe. Memory is not a mysterious power bestowed upon a select few. It is a tool that each of us possesses, but most let it rust in silence. The techniques you have learned are not mere tricks, but a different way of living, the way of someone who takes responsibility for their own mind. The most important lesson isn't whether you can remember a deck of cards or a long list. Those performances are just the surface. The core is the ability to transform data into experience, to turn invisible concepts into vivid images, to transform cold symbols into a personal story. And when you can do that, memory is no longer a passive act of recording, but an active participation in life. From here, you can ask yourself, what would happen if every number, every idea, every person you met left an unforgettable image in your mind? You would not only remember more, but also see the world with different eyes. The world would become a giant canvas where everything can be redrawn by imagination. However, the real question isn't how much you can remember, but what you will use your memory for. You can hold thousands of numbers in your head, but will they be meaningful if they don't lead to change? You can know history by heart, but will you see its lessons in today's life? Memory, if only for display, remains shallow. But if used to understand more deeply, to live more consciously, it will become an irreplaceable power. Try to imagine, if you trained your memory like you train a muscle, a little each day, what would you be like a year from now? Would you still rely on sticky notes and mobile devices to remind you of every small task? Or would you be confident that your brain is capable enough to be the most loyal notebook, always carried with you and never lost? Also, ask yourself, in a world where AI and technology increasingly take over human memory, is it worth preserving this skill? The paradoxical answer is that the more support tools there are, the more essential personal memory becomes. Because memory not only stores information, but also creates identity. What you choose to retain in your mind is what shapes who you are. If you entrust all your memories to machines, what will you have left to call your own? This is the moment I want you to pause, look straight at yourself, and ask, will you let your memory sleep quietly, an invisible entity, or will you awaken it as a power never fully unleashed? This book doesn't promise overnight change, it simply gives you the key. The rest is up to you to open the door. And behind that door, perhaps you will find a different version of yourself, clearer, stronger, and freer. So, start today. Try turning a short list into a story. Remember the name of a new acquaintance with a bizarre image. Choose a paragraph and engrave it with keywords in your mind. These small steps will accumulate. And one day, you will look back and see that your memory has not only improved, but has become an inherent part of you. I cannot take that step for you. I can only bring you here, pose the questions, and offer possibilities. The rest lies in your decision.